famous people who passed away in 1778. Before we proceed, please subscribe to our channel to support us. Ebenezer Kinnersley. He was born in November 1711 and he died in July 1778. His age was 66 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was an English-born scientist, inventor, lecturer, specializing in the investigation of electricity. He continued his experiments and invented an electrical thermometer and proved that heat could be produced by electricity, which was not known before. Philip Livingston. He was born in January 1716 and he died in June 1778. His age was 62 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was an American founding father, merchant, politician, and slave trader from New York City. He represented New York at October 1774 First Continental Congress, where he favored imposing economic sanctions upon Great Britain as a way of pursuing the British Parliament to repeal the Intolerable Acts. Bathsheba Spooner. She was born in February 1746 and she died in July 1778. Her age was 32 at the time of her death, and the reason for her death was execution. She was the first woman in American history to be executed following the Declaration of Independence. On the night of March 1, 1778, Spooner was beaten to death and his body deposited in a well. Bathsheba and the 3 conspirators were soon arrested, tried, and convicted of Spooner's murder and sentenced to death. Lydia Taft. She was born in February 1712 and she died in November 1778. Her age was 66 at the time of her death, and the reason for her death was undisclosed. She was the first woman known to legally vote in colonial America. This occurred at a town meeting in the New England town of Oxbridge in Massachusetts colony on October 30, 1756. Paul Jacques Malouin. He was born in June 1701 and he died in January 1778. His age was 76 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was a French physician and chemist. He entered the French Academy of Sciences in 1742, where his particular research interest was the application of chemistry to medicine. In 1745, he was appointed professor of chemistry. In 1742, he described in a presentation to the Royal Academy a method of coating iron by dipping it in molten zinc. Carl Linnaeus. He was born in May 1707 and he died in January 1778. His age was 70 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was stroke. He was a Swedish biologist and physician who formalized binomial nomenclature, the modern system of naming organisms. He is known as the father of modern taxonomy. Many of his writings were in Latin. His name is rendered in Latin as Carolus Linnaeus. Joseph Marie Thévet. He was born in December 1715 and he died in February 1778. His age was 62 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was a controller general of finances during the reign of Louis XV of France, an agent of fiscal reform. Thévet's position enabled him to become a lavish patron of the arts. Laura Bassi. She was born in October 1711 and she died in February 1778. Her age was 66 at the time of her death, and the reason for her death was undisclosed. She was an Italian physicist and academic recognized and depicted as Minerva, goddess of wisdom. She was the first woman to have doctorate in science and the second woman in the world to earn the Doctor of Philosophy degree. Alexander Murray of Elibank. He was born in 1712 and he died in 1778. His age was 66 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was the fourth son of Alexander Murray, 4th Lord Elibank, and brother of Patrick Murray, 5th Lord of Elibank. Thomas Hahn. He was born in March 1710 and he died in March 1778. His age was 67 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was an English composer. He is best known for his patriotic song, Rule Britannia, and the song, A Hunting We Will Go, the latter composed for a 1777 production of the Beggar's Opera, which has since become popular as a folk song and a nursery rhyme. He was a leading British theatre composer of the 18th century. Charles de Gaulle. He was born in February 1720 and he died in March 1778. His age was 58 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was gout. He was an entomologist, industrialist, civil servant, and book collector. He was a successful businessman and with time became one of the richest men in Sweden, headed an early industry employing around 3,000 people. Charles Le Beau. He was born in October 1701 and he died in March 1778. His age was 76 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was a French historical writer who wrote extensively about ancient Greece. From 1755 onward, he held the office of perpetual secretary to the Academy of Inscriptions, in which capacity he edited 15 volumes of the Histoire of that institution. Peter Taylor van der Hulst. He was born in March 1702 and he died in April 1778. His age was 76 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was a wealthy Dutch Mennonite merchant and banker who died childless, leaving a legacy of 2 million florins to the pursuit of religion, arts, and science in his hometown that led to the formation of Tyler's Museum. Charles Clemenceau. He was born in 1733 and he died in August 1778. His age was 73 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was a French Benedictine historian. He was born in Pays Blanc and was one of the authors who helped complete the great chronological work Art de vérifie date. He also wrote the part of the monumental Histoire littéraire de la France and the history of the Abbey of Port Royal. James Hargreaves. He was born in December 1720 and he died in April 1778. His age was 57 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was an English weaver, carpenter, and inventor who lived and worked in Lancashire, England. He is credited with inventing the spinning jenny in 1764. He was one of the 3 men responsible for the mechanization of spinning. Lawrence Christoph Missler. He was born in July 1711 and he died in May 1778. His age was 66 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was a German physician, historian, painter, mathematician, Baroque music composer, and precursor of the Enlightenment in Poland. Misler established the publishing house in 1740. He became a member of the Erfurt Academy of Sciences in 1755 and received Polish nobility in 1768. William Pitt, 1st Earl of Chatham. He was born in November 1708 and he died in May 1778. His age was 69 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was stroke. He was a British Whig statesman who served as the Prime Minister of Great Britain from 1766 to 1768. Historians call him Chatham or Pitt the Elder, to distinguish him from his son William Pitt the Younger, who also served as Prime Minister. Pitt was also known as the Great Commoner because of his long-standing refusal to accept a title. Anna Maria Mozart. She was born in December 1720 and she died in July 1778. Her age was 57 at the time of her death, and the reason for her death was undisclosed. She was the mother of Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart and Maria Anna Mozart. She married Leopold Mozart in Salzburg in 1747. Albert writes, "The two were regarded at the time as the handsomest couple in Salzburg." Sir Thomas Cave, 5th Baronet. He was born in May 1712 and he died in August 1778. His age was 66 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was a prominent figure in the mid-18th century British politics. Cave entered the British House of Commons in 1741, sitting as a Member of Parliament. Until 1747, he was again successful in 1762 and represented the constituency until his withdrawal from politics in 1774 because of ill health. Peregrine Bertie, 3rd Duke of Lancaster. He was born in 1714 and he died in August 1778. His age was 64 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was a respected nobleman of his time. He gained the rank of Major General in January 1755, Lieutenant General in February 1759, and General in May 1772. For some time in the 1750s, he sought to establish a series of mines in Upper Wales. Conrad Ackoff. He was born in August 1720 and he died in June 1778. His age was 57 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was a German actor, often regarded as the foremost actor of German-speaking Europe in the 18th century. He was noted for his collaboration with the theater principal Abel Seiler in 1760s and 1770s, first at the Hamburg National Theater and then at the Traveling Sailor Theater Company. Francesca Cuzzoni. She was born in April 1696 and she died in June 1778. Her age was 82 at the time of her death, and the reason for her death was undisclosed. She was one of the greatest operatic talents of Baroque era. She made her Venetian debut in 1718, in which, for the first time, she appeared on the same stage as Faustina Bordoni, later her great rival. Peter Berman the Younger. He was born in October 1713 and he died in June 1778. His age was 64 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was a Dutch philologist who was a leading scholar of ancient texts. He completed the editions of Virgil and Claudian, which had been left unfinished by his uncle, and commenced an edition of Propertius, one of his best works, which was only half printed at the time of his death. It was completed by L. van Santen and published in 1780. Johann Augustin Mannerheim. He was born in August 1706 and he died in August 1778. His age was 72 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was a Swedish nobleman, an artillery colonel, and the Gothenburg commandant. He was a great-great-grandfather of Baron C.G.E. Mannerheim, the Marshal of Finland. He documented the cultural heritage of Finland. Washington Shirley, 5th Earl Ferris. He was born in May 1722 and he died in October 1778. His age was 56 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was a British Royal Navy officer, hereditary peer, Freemason, and amateur astronomer. In about 1738, he joined the Royal Navy and rose through the ranks to Vice Admiral in 1775. He was appointed a Deputy Lieutenant of Staffordshire on 28 August 1761. Sir George Hay. He was born in January 1715 and he died in October 1778. His age was 63 at the time of his death, and he took his own life. He was a British judge and politician who sat in the House of Commons between 1754 and 1778. In May 1778, he became ill and was known to be lunatic. By August, arrangements to terminate his legal offices were being made when, in October, he escaped from his asylum and drowned himself at the age of 63. He never married. Jean-Jacques Rousseau. He was born in June 1712 and he died in July 1778. His age was 66 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was stroke. He was a Genevan philosopher, writer, and composer. His political philosophy influenced the progress of the Age of Enlightenment throughout Europe, as well as aspects of the French Revolution and the development of modern political, economic, and educational thought. Paul-Joseph Lemoine de Longueuil. He was born in September 1701 and he died in May 1778. His age was 76 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was a colonial army officer in New France and governor of Trois-Rivières from 1757 to 1760. In 1743, he became commandant of Detroit during the War of Austrian Succession. The neighborhood native tribes revolted against the French, but he was later able to re-establish peace in the region. Robert Darcy, 4th Earl of Holderness. He was born in May 1718 and he died in May 1778. His age was 59 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was a British diplomat and politician who negotiated key treaties for Britain from 1744 to 1746. He was ambassador at Venice, and from 1749 to 1751 he represented his country at The Hague. In 1751 he became Secretary of State for the Southern Department, transferring in 1754 to the Northern Department. José de la Borda. He was born in 1700 and he died in May 1778. His age was 78 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was a Spanish who migrated to the New Spain in 18th century, amassing a great fortune in maize in Mexico. At one point, he was the richest man in Mexico. He is best remembered today through several architectural works that he sponsored, the most monumental being the Santa Prisca Church in Texcoco. Voltaire, he was born in November 1694 and he died in May 1778. His age was 83 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was a French Enlightenment writer, philosopher, and historian, famous for his wit and his criticism of Christianity and of slavery. He was an advocate of freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and separation of church and state. Saliha Sultan, she was born in March 1715 and she died in October 1778. Her age was 63 at the time of her death, and the reason for her death was undisclosed. She was an Ottoman prince, the daughter of Sultan Ahmed III and the consort Hatem Kandu. She had a twin brother who died in infancy. She was a half-sister of Sultans Mustafa III and Abdul Hamid I. Henry Ernest of Stolberg, Wernigerode, he was born in December 1716 and he died in October 1778. His age was 61 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was a German politician, canon, dean, and author of many hymns. He also published some poetry and collections of songs. He was Count of Stolberg, Wernigerode from 1771 until his death. Giovanni Battista Piranesi, he was born in October 1720 and he died in November 1778. His age was 58 at the time of his death, and he died after a long illness. He was an Italian classical archaeologist, architect, and artist, famous for his etchings of Rome and of fictitious and atmospheric prisons. Francesco Chatti, he was born in August 1726 and he died in November 1778. His age was 52 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was an Italian priest, zoologist, and mathematician. In 1765, he was sent to Sardinia to help improve the standard of education on the island. In 1766, he was appointed to the chair of mathematics at the University of Sassari, holding that position until his death. Anne Steele, she was born in 1717 and she died in November 1778. Her age was 61 at the time of her death, and the reason for her death was undisclosed. She was an English Baptist hymn writer and essayist. For a full century after her death, she filled a larger place in the United States and British hymnals than any other woman. Pedro Antonio de Ceballos, he was born in June 1715 and he died in December 1778. His age was 63 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was a Spanish military governor of Buenos Aires between 1757 and 1766, and the first viceroy of the Rio de la Plata in 1776. He was an influential colonial leader in South America. Constantine, Landgrave of Hesse-Rotenburg, he was born in May 1716 and he died in December 1778. His age was 62 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He managed a small but strategically important principality under Constantine. Hesse Warnfried was in 1755 returned to Hesse-Rotenburg after the death of Christian of Hesse-Warnfried. Hesse-Rotenburg, which had been divided in 1648, was now again reunited and remained so until the Treaty of Luneville. Thomas Johnson, he was born in 1714 and he died in 1778. His age was 64 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was an English wood carver and furniture maker. Johnson worked in London and is particularly known for bold or extreme use of mixture of Rococo, Chinese, and rustic motifs. He was said to be one of the most successful exponents of the Rococo style, giving it a vitality not seen in the work of other designers. Thanks for watching the video. Please don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Have a nice day.